Okay, let's unpack this. We have been handed just a phenomenal chronicle. We're looking at a single, um, incredibly dense sequence of events, all unfolding on one cold night, right at 2100 hours inside the grounds of the ETA.
The Enfield Tennis Academy, yeah.
And this isn't just, a simple record of a few hours. This is a deep dive into concealed lives, into these hidden power struggles, and some really profound internal crises.
That's really our mission here, isn't it? To perform a kind of forensic analysis, we have to look past the surface.
What do you mean by the surface?
Well, the mandatory order of the academy,
The-
the study period, the drills, this incredibly rigid hierarchy, we have to excavate the emotional cost of just existing within that structure.
So we're looking for the effort.
The extraordinary effort,
Yeah.
the effort required by everyone, and I mean everyone from the dean of females down to the youngest students, just to maintain that external composure while they are navigating genuine sadness, some deep familial trauma, and just this raw existential fear.
And our sources, they take us into three, intensely private, highly intimate encounters, and they're all centered around the Incandenza family.
Right. We have Mario, the documentarian, who is acting as our reluctant guide through this.
And then his mother, Avril, who is this hyper-functional dean, and then, of course, Hal, the brilliant but, as we'll see, secretly collapsing brother.
And then, after all that intensity, the chronicle pivots sharply to this seemingly disconnected conversation, but it's thematically crucial, between two total outsiders, Catherine and Remy.
Yeah, that pivot is so important.
It is, because the structure itself, the way the chronicle jumps between these scenes, it helps define the core themes for us.
And that fundamental tension is what?
It's between the Academy's external, almost military-like order and the total internal chaos, the emotional engulfment, as it's called, that these characters are so desperately trying to avoid.
And at the same time, we're decoding this really sophisticated language of familial love.
A language where respect is so often shown not through, a hug or traditional comfort, but through distance, through autonomy.
Which is so counterintuitive.
It is. And finally, we're going to see the brutal mechanics of choice. What happens when avoiding your own pain becomes the only available metric for living?
Okay, so let's jump right into that immediate physical landscape of the Academy, because everything about it feels controlled, cold, and brightly lit. This is the stage.
This is the stage upon which all the concealment is performed. And our guide through this stage is Mario Incandenza.
We have to start with his filming setup, don't we? And it's just so specific.
We have to. It's crucial. Because he carries this Bolex H64 camera, and it's not on a tripod. It's strapped to his head.
Right to his head. And then there's a coax cable running from it.
To a foot treadle that he has to hold to his chest to operate. I mean, just picture that. The gear is incredibly cumbersome. It's heavy. It's almost absurdly complex.
You really get the sense that Mario is in a constant physical struggle with it.
He is. And yet that entire apparatus, that struggle, it signals this unwavering dedication to objectivity.
To recording the world as it truly is.
Exactly. Even if the act of recording is physically painful for him, cumbersome, it doesn't matter. The objective view is everything.
And that objective view, that first scene he captures, is it's profoundly ascetic.
Ascetic is the perfect word. The cold is intense. You can almost feel it through the page. The center courts are brightly lit, but they're eerily empty.
Except for two players, Gretchen Holt and Jolene Kreis. And they're finishing what must be this marathon challenge match.
They're described as barrel-bodied because they're wearing so many layers of sweats, and their hair, it's frozen into these electrified spikes.
That detail is so vivid.
It tells you everything. This isn't just training. This is extreme physical exertion that borders on a kind of a painful religious practice.
Yeah.
It signals that suffering, the cold, the pain, the absolute commitment is an essential and very visible part of the Academy's identity.
And from that very open, very public, frozen suffering, we move directly into a tightly controlled, isolated environment.
Coach Stitt's room 106, which immediately presents us with a paradox.
Tell us about that room, because the source material makes it sound like a sensory deprivation chamber that is simultaneously blasting sound.
That is exactly it. It's an almost monastic space. Hardwood floors, an army cot, acoustic damping tile on every wall. It is completely soundproofed.
And yet the noise inside is deafening.
Deafening. Stitt is asleep in the center of the room, and he's surrounded by what the Chronicle calls excruciatingly loud European opera. Wagnerian bass so powerful it makes the windows tremble. So loud it forces Mario, our documentarian, to physically cover his ears.
He's got these massive Mario-sized speakers in every corner, and the cloth covers are removed so you can see the woofers just mightily throbbing.
Stitz sleeps amid what is called auditory annihilation, and we're told this is attributed to grim childhood experiences at an Austrian academy.
The analytical gold is right here, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Stitz's choice to sleep through this overwhelming, punishingly loud sound, it suggests a profound pathology. This is a man who has channeled deep, early trauma into an absolute need for environmental extremity.
He needs the outside world to be so loud.
So all-consuming that it drowns out whatever internal noise, whatever trauma might otherwise surface when he tries to rest. It's a defense mechanism, but taken to the absolute limit.
And his physical description is part of that paradox, too.
Yeah.
He looks very old and white and frail, yet also obscenely fit.
He embodies it completely, a deep fragility, but also immense internal strength. And that strength requires this auditory annihilation just for him to achieve rest. It's fascinating.
So if he's channeling all this trauma into control, doesn't that make him just another version of the suppressed person Mario's looking for? Is his strength this ability to sleep through Wagner? Is that just another mask?
That raises such a crucial question about the Academy itself, right? The strongest characters, the leaders, like Stitt, they aren't necessarily the ones who are free from internal pain.
And not at all.
They are the ones who have constructed the most effective, the most extreme, and I guess the most functional coping mechanism. Stitt, even though he's asleep, is exerting total, overwhelming control over his environment.
And then there's that detail about his stance.
Yes. We learn that his wide, stolid stance, even when he's just seated, is due to his varicocele, a physical malady. But he doesn't hide it. He simply incorporates it into his imposing physical presence. He is the sleeping giant in complete command.
And you contrast that with Mario, our objective observer,
who loses control immediately. The moment he tries to leave the room, he falls. Not once, but twice, loudly. He's struggling, his hands are clamped over his extremely sensitive ears, and Stitt doesn't even stir.
Wow.
That single moment is a perfect microcosm of the academy hierarchy. The head coach's presence, even when he's unconscious, is this dominating, non-negotiable force.
Well, Mario, the highly equipped documentarian, is physically compromised.
Completely compromised by the sheer intensity of the coach's self-imposed environment. The observer loses his composure while the subject maintains total, unconscious command. It's a perfect power dynamic in miniature.
So leaving that oppressive, soundproofed isolation of Stitt's room, Mario heads into the combat stairwells. And the feeling changes again.
It does. These are narrow, functional spaces. Cold iron, rough cement. There's the sandy echo that implies motion and tension. And it's 2100, so it's mandatory study period. The halls are quiet, but it's a tense quiet.
The environment immediately signals the pressure, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The second floor, you have these low voices, light filtering under the doors, but then we get these brief, almost painful snapshots.
That's the Vought twins in enormous towels and curlers.
And even more telling, the sound of brisk, controlled sounds of retching from behind Diane Prin's door.
So the physical demand of their training is manifesting as this intense physical anxiety, even during the supposed quiet time.
The pressure is inescapable. And that hallway, it provides this fascinating series of micro-interactions that really define the unspoken rules of this hyper-aware community.
Starting with Felicity's flag. She emerges from her door and just holds her hand out straight at his head's camera.
Like a distant stiff arm.
Yeah.
And her repetition of, "I'm wearing a towel," that isn't just a statement of fact, you know. It's a sophisticated, nonverbal demand for privacy. She is establishing a very firm boundary against Mario's relentless objective documentation.
She's asserting her personal territory in a place where I imagine selfhood is constantly under surveillance.
Constantly. And what's so critical here is Mario's response to that.
He immediately pivots the lens to the bare wall.
Exactly. His empathy in that moment trumps his documentary objective. He shows this immediate respect for her boundaries, even as he happens to capture a few crucial seconds of her.
Hurrying away in the towel, tiny little bird steps looking terribly fragile.
That description is heartbreaking. And his respect for her frailty, it reveals that the objective camera operator is not cold. He's not unfeeling. He chooses compassion over content when a boundary is clearly drawn.
Then, up on the third floor, we encounter Lamont Chu. And he has a completely different energy.
A totally different energy. He's fresh out of the shower, wet hair, whistling dixies, hairless muscular calves. And unlike Zoig, Chu is actively seeking the camera. He squares his shoulders for posterity.
He wants the attention. He's trying to leverage the documentary instantly.
Right, he's ready for the spotlight. He's trying to manufacture this moment of performative celebrity. He even asks, "You want me to say something for posterity?"
But when Mario actually invites him to speak meaningfully, what happens?
He blanks. A total mental blankness. The Chronicle calls it a staticky blank field. He's ready for the facade for the performance, but he's incapable of genuine substance on demand.
And when that performance fails, he immediately shifts roles.
Immediately, he becomes the information broker. He dives right into the Eschaton debacle.
Now, for anyone listening who isn't familiar with the specific events, Eschaton was this incredibly complex, satirical, but also ultra-violent disciplinary disaster.
A disaster that led to real physical harm, Lord's head injury, Penn's leg, the postman's broken nose. And now Chu is probing the political fallout from all of that.
This is a direct political maneuver, then.
Absolutely. Chu is testing the boundaries of Mario's camera. He's trying to use the documentary as a conduit for rumor and for leverage. He links the disciplinary action to this rumor that Van Vleck saw the urine guy holding them both by the ear.
And he's trying to extract information about how Mario's own brother and Troeltsch and whether they're facing blame.
It's pure politics, but Mario's defensive technique here is just, it's fascinatingly weird.
So how does focusing on the camera's output, not the question itself, act as a shield for him?
It's masterful avoidance. He continuously redirects the conversation back to affirming Chu's actions. He says things like, "You're acting perfectly natural. This is very good. I'm getting all this."
He's using the camera's function as a literal shield.
He is. He will not confirm or deny any of the rumors. He remains a pure observer. So when Chu pushes him, when he asks, "I'm asking if Hal's told you what they're going to do to anybody,"
Mario deflects. He focuses on the language.
he says, "Is this what you're saying, or are you asking me?" Which is just this brilliant, almost philosophical judo move.
And that taut exchange, it forces Chu to confront the limits of this documentary. Mario won't play the game.
He won't validate rumors or share privileged family information, and Chu gets it. He calls Mario a rock, realizing the observer cannot be moved.
But Mario just dismisses the insult as a positive sign that the recording is going very well.
And the immediate consequence of that whole exchange is that Mario has successfully maintained his objective distance. He's refused to be drawn into the Academy's political fallout.
But he has also shut down Chu's attempt to use the documentary for personal or political leverage. He's confirmed that the camera is a neutral observer. It is not a weapon.
That's a crucial distinction.
So now we transition. We move from the cold public politics of the Academy into the intensely private psychological core of the Incandenza family.
Mario makes his way to the Dean of Females' office, his mother's office, Avril Incandenza.
And the entire atmosphere shifts completely. We go from that cold cement and noise to what's called the special hush of lobby carpet.
And the comforting smell of Benson and Hedges cigarettes.
That sensory shift is so important, isn't it?
It is. Avril Incandenza's office is a world unto itself, and it's a world marked by her need for control and for light. The source calls her a fiend for light.
Overheads, torches, desk lamps.
Everything is on, creating this space of manufactured warmth and, I think, relentless visibility. Nothing can hide in the shadows here. Her desk is hyper-organized, yet intimidatingly complex. Stacks of folders, and it's crowned by this seminal text, Introduction to Montague Semantics.
Okay, let's pause on that. What does her interest in formal language theory, this Montague semantics, tell us about how Avril approaches human emotion?
I think it tells us everything about her core psychological framework. Montague semantics is a highly formal, almost mathematical approach to analyzing natural language.
So it's about rules and structure.
Exactly. For Avril, communication, and by extension, human emotion, it must be categorized, it must be predictable, it must be formally structured, it cannot be chaotic or spontaneous.
So she approaches mothering and administration with the same rigidity.
Like a mathematician attempting to solve a language proof. Everything has a place, an explanation, a rule.
So when Mario comes in, she's swiveled away from the door, and she's checking the load of a stapler, which he describes as looking alligatorish in her hand.
A great detail. But her immediate addressing of Mario's reflection in the window confirms her hyper-awareness. She sees everything, even when she isn't looking directly at it.
And their initial interaction is just. It's defined by this deep, nonverbal trust and respect.
It really is. Mario is visibly struggling on this treacherous, deep shag carpet. He's burdened by his heavy headgear, and Avril sees him struggling.
But she deliberately chooses not to offer help.
Right. Because she knows he would ask if he needed it.
This is such a profound illustration of her stellar mother identity, as the source calls it. It's not about hovering or intrusive comfort. It's about absolute respect for his autonomy.
It is. She's creating a psychological space where, and this is a quote, so little important needs to be said that she loves it. The comfortable silence and their shared unspoken struggles, those are the foundations of their relationship.
And it is only within that silent, trusted space that Mario feels safe enough to perform his most confidential act.
Which is turning the camera off.
And then he introduces his central existential query. He asks, how can you tell if somebody's sad?
And Avril's response is so immediate and so perfectly her. It begins, predictably, with a technical correction.
You mean whether someone's sad?
Of course. And then she launches into this incredibly clinical, yet also empathetic, taxonomy of sadness and its concealment. She's fulfilling her dual role perfectly there.
The academic dean and the maternal guide.
Exactly, and she starts with the easy answers, right? Direct expressions. Crying, sobbing, wailing.
But Mario pushes her on the lack of those visible cues, so she moves on to the more subtle behavioral signs.
Right, the things you have to look for. Sighing, moping, smiling half-heartedly, slumping, lethargy, or just seeming low or quiet. The classic symptoms of emotional torpor. This is the standard observable framework.
But the conversation immediately moves past mere symptoms.
Yeah.
It goes right into the pathology of concealment, which she introduces as suppression.
And she makes a point to crucially distinguish this from repression.
What's the difference for her?
Repression is unconscious. You don't know you're doing it. But suppression. Suppression is a deliberate, conscious, functional choice. And she defines it as being rooted in this profound existential fear of emotional engulfment or obliteration.
Obliteration is such a strong word. What exactly does she mean by that?
She's describing a person who possesses a fragile sense of themselves as persons, as existing at all. That's the key.
So they're afraid that if they allow themselves even one moment of genuine, uncontrolled grief or sadness,
it would have no end or bottom. They wouldn't just be sad, they would be entirely consumed by it, and their functional self, the person they present to the world, would just cease to exist.
they suppress to survive.
That's it. And this brings us to the absolute core of the Incandenza family legacy, which she recounts with a chillingly pleasant smile the entire time.
The mask is performing the lesson even as she teaches it.
Perfectly put. She uses her own paternal history to illustrate this pathology. She describes her grandfather, who suffered this massive financial loss early on.
Because he made a disastrous choice in soft drinks.
It sounds absurd, but yes. He backed a brand called Delaware Punch instead of...
The obscure sweet fizzy coffee substitute that became Coca-Cola.
That's the one.
So this massive generational trauma, this pathology of emotional avoidance that ends in violence, it all starts because he backed the wrong soft drink.
That's the incredible, almost absurd specificity of the source material. That major tragedy can hinge on the most banal corporate choice. And the grandfather, suffering that massive public loss, was frozen.
He could only feel emotion when he was drunk.
Which led to explosive violence, specifically throwing Avril's own father through the living room window.
And her own father, in turn, internalized this whole pattern.
He did. He could only tell this traumatic story when he was drunk. And he eventually died after falling out of his chair, without ever expressing genuine, clear sadness or anger himself. It's a tragic cycle.
So her composure while she's narrating this fatal generational legacy, that's the key to understanding her own mask.
It has to be. Avril's persistent, pleasant smile suggests that her highly practiced, hyper-functional exterior, her need for light, her organized desk, her grasp of formal semantics, is a survival mechanism.
She chose composure as protection.
Protection against the chaotic, explosive, fatal consequences of her male relative's emotional avoidance.
But Mario, the documentarian who sees the unsaid, he has this crucial, sophisticated insight that goes beyond his mother's academic framework.
He does. He presses her on a specific case, one that challenges her entire taxonomy. He asks, what if it's that they're almost like even more themselves than normal? If he's himself even more than before a sad thing happened?
This is the deep lie he is trying to uncover, a form of hyper-functional denial.
He's describing a person who doesn't slump or mope. They overcompensate. They perform normalcy better than before the trauma. This is the monster of competence, masking an infinite pain.
And Avril visibly struggles with this. She can't file this observation under suppression.
No, it doesn't fit. She gets what's described as a little red sideways line in the skin between her eyes, an observable sign of confusion, and she immediately tries to ground this abstract fear in reality by asking if he's discussing Uncle Charles or Hal, her sons, she needs to categorize it.
She cannot fit this hyperfunctional performance into her academic definition of suppressed sadness.
No, because her framework demands visible signs of withdrawal, being wooden, deadened, disconnected. So she ultimately has to circle back to the conventional academic conclusion.
Which is?
A person who cannot express sadness will inevitably turn to drugs or alcohol, which, ironically, both blunt the real sadness and allow some skewed version of the sadness some sort of expression.
And Mario's gaze at the end. It finally lands on the window. He's watching the dark, writhing movement of the high clouds.
A perfect contrast to the stillness and hyper-organization of the office. He's looking outside for the visible manifestation of that internal chaos his mother cannot see or perhaps cannot acknowledge.
The conversation ends without a satisfactory answer from Mario.
Not at all. Avril reassures him of her total, unwavering trust. But the question just hangs in the air. How do you spot the sadness in someone who is performing normalcy better than ever before?
And that unanswered question leads us directly to the source of Mario's concern, the subject of his earlier deflection with Lamantiu.
His brother, Hal Condenza.
And this is where we find the terrifying answer to that hypernormalcy query.
The scene shifts immediately, abruptly. We're with Hal and Mario sharing a rack-a-bed as Hal wakes up from a wicked awful dream.
A dream about losing his teeth.
Which is a massive red flag. Losing teeth is such an ancient anxiety. It symbolizes a profound loss of control, a loss of power, of the ability to communicate or to, bite back.
And Mario also notes that Hal was repeatedly saying, "Thank you, sir, may I have another?" in his sleep.
Which just reveals his subconscious subservience to authority, even while he's wrestling with this personal crisis.
Well, Hal wakes up and immediately tries to talk around his core fear.
He does. He brings up these recurring bills for teeth, but not his own teeth. Bills for somebody else's dental decay.
What does that symbolize?
It's his feeling of overwhelming, inescapable responsibility for others' decay, which he can't articulate to the mail carrier, who seems to represent fate or these authority figures in his life. He feels responsible for a rot that isn't even his.
Mario tries to keep the discussion a bit lighter. He pivots to a specific, painful familial memory involving their older brother, Oren.
Right, he recalls Oren's pathological intensity in lying. Specifically, lying about turning off the phone that was tied near their mother's beloved dog, S. Johnson.
The dog had its own phone.
So she could call and let the dog hear her unique personal ring. But Mario's memory here, his phenomenal memory for things I remember that I liked, it reveals his own coping mechanism.
He filters trauma through palatable memories.
Exactly, but Hal won't let it go. He insists on bringing it back to the subject of Oren's pathological intensity and deception. They're preparing the ground, through their own family history, for Hal's own massive, paralyzing confession.
And then Hal directly addresses it. The subject Mario, respecting his mother's position of total trust in her sons, had avoided. The impending ONA-NTA drug test.
The test following the Eschaton debacle. And the stakes here are absolutely existential. This isn't just some simple dipstick test.
No, it's a full-spectrum GCMS scan.
Gas chromatography followed by mass spectrometry. This is the industrial strength test, the kind that detects everything.
And Hal confesses his secret. He smokes high-resin Bob Hope in secret.
And the problem is that this particular substance is fat-soluble. It stays in the body's fat tissues for weeks. So a positive result is not just possible, it's genuine and likely.
The consequence of failing is twofold. First, obviously, expulsion from the academy.
But second, and this is crucial for him, is the public disgrace that would tarnish the memory of their father, himself, and, most importantly, the profound secrecy and betrayal. He believes it would kill the mom's dead.
It's the shame and the deception, not the substance use itself, that is the ultimate threat to him.
That's his fear, and this leads to the incredible revelation of Pemulus's heroism and sacrifice, a sacrifice which Hal is now carrying like this new, terrible burden.
Pemulus, the guy people often dismiss as a weak-stomach clutch artist.
That same guy. He negotiated the 30-day delay for the full spectrum scan. Now, Pemulus himself could have passed the test easily. He uses a catheterization technique, and his typical drug of choice is short-acting. But he recognized the sheer danger that Hal was in.
So Pemulus performed a brass mask of weary pragmatism. He sold the urologist a complete lie to buy Hal the month that he so desperately needs to clean his system.
Exactly, and the power dynamic there is entirely inverted. Hal, the genius, the star, is compromised and totally dependent. He's trapped in the lie that Pemulus made for him.
And Pemulus, the suspected target, took all the heat as the sacrificial lamb.
He allowed the suspicion to fall on him while Hal works furiously in secret to cleanse his system. It's an incredible act of loyalty.
And Hal admits the 30 days will be a huge hole in a month, a way more than Hal-sized hole.
He is anticipating abrupt withdrawal symptoms, the internal chaos he describes as bats inside and horror show dreams. He foresees the spectacular public failure, all fly apart in midair.
And that pressure, it forces Hal to intellectualize the monstrous thing he feels he is becoming, the liar.
Yes, he shifts into this philosophical analysis, outlining his field guide to liars, the still-centered dominators, the fluttery insubstantial types, the digression barriers.
The kamikaze liars and the rococo elaborators, which he says Pemilices used to be.
And his conclusion is just terrifyingly despairing. He says he no longer fears childhood monsters. He fears the modern, sophisticated, monstrous liar, the type who is too good, too complex, and idiosyncratic. Their lies are too close to the truth's heart for you to tell.
And there it is, the synthesis of our earlier conversation with Averill.
Exactly. Hal, the master analyst, realizes that his required performance, his hyper-normalcy over the past several months, the very thing Mario recognized but couldn't name, is the definition of this new monster.
He is terrified of the competent liar he must become to survive this test, knowing that this performance of normalcy is the ultimate monstrosity because it is so successful at concealing the infinite pain beneath.
He's become the thing he fears most.
And in utter despair, he asks Mario, who he describes as having a Panglossian constitution, meaning someone almost pathologically optimistic, how he determines whether he's being lied to.
And Mario's response just cuts through all of that intellectual noise. He says, "I can't ever tell. You wanted to know. You're right. It never crosses my mind."
Wow.
He doesn't engage with the philosophical monster. He just provides this pure, non-judgmental response that pivots the conversation right back to Hal's immediate human pain. He acknowledges the weight of the confession without judging the philosophy of it.
And then we get to the final decisive moment in this exchange. Hal, reduced to just two big apric ears, asks, "Tell me what I should do."
And Mario's devastatingly simple, intuitive counsel is, "I think you just did it. What you should do, I think you just did."
That's the immediate consequence then.
That's it. Mario confirms that Hal's agonizing act of confession, his reliance on Pemulus' sacrifice, and his decision to face the shame and the withdrawal, that is his choice. That is the difficult, necessary path out of his cage of concealment and towards survival. The decision to accept the pain was made by the act of telling the truth to his brother.
That choice, the necessary burden, that leads us to our final section, an almost thematic echo that's occurring miles away from the Academy.
Where we see another set of characters defining their lives, their love, and their sense of self through necessary suffering.
The scene shifts abruptly to Ryle's Inman Square Club of Jazz late at night. Two people are explicitly seeking quiet.
And we meet Catherine, a recovering addict who was recently mugged, and she's drinking Kahlua and milk. And then Remy, a Swiss man in a wheelchair, who we learn is secretly a spy for his nation and whose wife is terminally ill.
The connection between these two is so immediate and raw. It's a shared connection over pain.
It is. Catherine is seeking what she calls Novocaine of the soul. She wants to reach zero even, feeling no pain. And Remy introduces his entire story by saying, "I'm sensing you have an idea of hurting."
They bond not over joy, but over the desire for emotional numbness.
And Remy then narrates his profound personal trauma, the loss of his legs to a train, his father's death by a misplaced cell phone call, interfering with his pacemaker.
And the national paper atrocities of an invasion that left him moribund.
Moribund, trapped, rolling around, wishing for death. He was unable to choose anything outside his internal cage of the self. He was completely stuck.
And he describes this pivotal moment of choice that saved him from that. He was at the top of a hill, and he saw a small, terrified woman, Gertrude, in the path of a speeding truck.
And he states explicitly, "I do not think of me. I do not know this woman or love her." But instinctually, he releases his brake and he rushes down the hill to save her.
That act, he explains, broke my moribund chains.
It did. He realized in that one moment that the pain of inside no longer pained me. I became then adult. He had chosen something concrete and external, saving another person, that was suddenly more important than his own suffering. And that single choice was his escape hatch from his internal cage.
But the reality of Gertrude immediately inverts the conventional hero narrative. This wasn't some beautiful princess he saved.
Not at all. She has no skull. It's a birth defect from the invasion's toxicity. She suffers from seizures, digestive troubles, and dribble cerebrospinal fluid. She has to wear a metal helmet.
Is a brutal reality.
And Remy explains that his marriage to her wasn't based on passion or pleasure. Catherine has this very conventional expectation of romance, right? Your eyes meet, knees give out.
But for Remy, the love was the choice itself.
Yes. He says, I had chosen. My choice, this was love.
He even tried to leave her once, to roll off into a new, uncaged life.
But the old despair, the paralyzing pain of not choosing returned immediately, and it forced him back to the choice of caring for her. The care itself is the mechanism of his own survival.
And Catherine, whose entire concept of love is as a refuge or a source of pleasure and gratification, she rejects this completely.
She sees it as self-flagellation. She calls it low self-esteem and self-abuse and settling for less, and she insists it's like a gun to your head. She argues that if you can't choose the other way, the pleasurable way, then there's no real choice at all.
But Remy's counter-argument is really the thematic anchor for this entire deep dive, isn't it?
It really is, he says. It chains me, but the chains are of my choice. The other chains? No. The others were the chains of not choosing. He accepted the necessary burden of commitment because the alternative was the infinite, paralyzing pain of self-obsession.
And this necessary burden is what leads to his ultimate current betrayal.
Gertrude is now in an irreversible coma. Yet Remy is actively spying and betraying his friends, his nation, his entire life's cause.
To secure the advanced Jarvik Neckist exterior artificial heart.
A heart that is monumentally expensive and dangerous to acquire, and which will only keep her alive in a comatose and vegetated state. He is actively sacrificing his entire identity and his moral compass for a purely mechanical existence for her.
His motivation is just.
Yeah.
It's terrifyingly logical and utterly desperate.
It is. He's betraying his life's cause simply to maintain the mechanism of his initial life-saving choice. Without Gertrude to serve, without that specific burden to choose over himself, he believes there is only the pain and not choosing. His entire existence depends on maintaining that chain, even if it is painful and yields absolutely no pleasure.
And Catherine is ultimately just repulsed. She argues that Remy's definition of love commitment, regardless of pain, it yields none of the pleasure she seeks.
And that highlights the fundamental gulf between love as a temporary refuge and love as a defining, relentless burden.
This was a cold, hard, deep dive into the costs of existence under pressure, wasn't it?
It really was. We moved from that macro performance of control and the ascetic life at the academy right down to the micro level of internal psychological chains. And ultimately, we found that concealment is everywhere, and it so often looks deceptively like competence.
The Chronicle revealed that some characters, like Stitt, Avril, Pemulus, they survive by constructing these elaborate, seemingly functional, highly competent masks.
And those masks are built on specific choices, whether it's total environmental control or an act of self-sacrifice. And others, like Hal, are just utterly collapsing beneath the weight of their own hyper-functional mask.
And we finally found the definitive answer to Mario's essential query: how to spot sadness when someone acts even more themselves.
And the answer, supplied by Hal's agonizing confession, is that the hypernormalcy is the performance of the monster. It is the terrifyingly competent liar, the only performance available when the internal chaos is so vast that expressing it would mean obliteration.
And the characters who ultimately find a path forward are the ones who deliberately choose their pain. They choose their burden.
Remy's choice of Gertrude, accepting the necessary chains of commitment. Hal's choice to face withdrawal and shame, breaking the chains of secrecy. The choice is to accept the infinite nature of pain, rather than succumb to the paralysis of not choosing.
We've seen that the fear of pain, the fear of this emotional engulfment, drives people to choose terrible extremes.
From betraying a nation to keeping a vegetative spouse alive, to risking expulsion just to avoid maternal discovery, these aren't choices made for pleasure or for success. They're made for psychological survival.
So we'll leave you with this final provocative thought. If you analyze your own most difficult choices, the ones that feel necessary but agonizing, how many of them are driven not by desire or ambition, but purely by the avoidance of a pain you've been conditioned to believe is infinite and without end?
It forces us to ask, is survival often just the cleverest form of avoidance?
A deep question worth chewing on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.